The stories told on this channel aim to explore the human mind at its darkest. This is a narrative told from the perspective of the perpetrator. There is no glorification here, only the unease of realizing that evil can have a voice, a shape, and an address. They say everyone's got an invisible rope tied to the past. Some cut it, some pull it. Mine was never cut, just pulled tighter. And I knew that, sooner or later, it was going to strangle someone. I work out of the 37th precinct, one of those places that reeks of mildew and stale sweat, where the walls are too thin for all the secrets they hold. I put on the badge every day, strap the belt, chamber the pistol, and still feel more like a criminal than half the guys I've cuffed. It's not guilt exactly. It's the fact that, unlike them, I learned how to look clean. His name is Ray Mercer. Runs a small auto shop on the west side of town, near that dead stretch of warehouses and trailer lots. Faded blue facade, American flag out front, a brand new sign with his name in fat red letters, Mercer Auto Repair, honest work, fair prices. Trimmed beard, friendly smile, even got a photo with the local pastor when he opened the place. But I remember the Ray who helped me dump a body back in '02, behind that old rail yard on Grant Avenue. I remember the stench of blood on the carpet, rusted chains in the trunk, the sticky grip of the steering wheel as we drove in silence for 3 neighborhoods. I swung first. He just finished it, and now he walks around like it never happened. Like that night was just a footnote in the life of someone who turned it around. It started small. I'd cruise by the shop after my shift, pretending it was part of my patrol route. Parked a couple blocks away, headlights off, chewing on a cold cheeseburger while I watched him close up. Waved to the neighbors, not at kids on bikes. His routine was annoyingly perfect. Every day, at 6 p.m. sharp, he'd lock up with this worn leather keychain, flip his cap backward, and head to his silver Chevy like his soul weighed nothing. I told myself it was just precaution, just in case he decided to talk. But deep down, I knew it wasn't fear, it was resentment. Resentment that he'd moved on, that he could smile, that he somehow slept better at night than I did. First time I entered the shop was on a Sunday. Streets dead quiet by 4 p.m., and the only camera on the block had been conveniently malfunctioning for weeks, courtesy of a buddy of mine in city utilities. Used an old master key, fits those outdated locks he never replaced. Didn't steal anything, touched his tools, sat in his chair, opened his drawer, all bills paid, rent, taxes, employee insurance. That pissed me off more than I expected. It was like he'd wiped every trace of what we did. Left everything the way I found it, except I moved a wrench. Left the bathroom light on. Just enough to make him wonder. 2 days later, he'd installed a new keypad lock, cheap kind. Probably bought it in a panic. He'd also mounted one of those fake security cams that blink red even when they're not wired. Almost sad. But what struck me was his body language, quicker steps, checking over his shoulder, locking the door, even for 5-minute errands. I could read the signs. Ray was feeling it, like the weight was finally being shared, like he was finally carrying some of what I'd buried for both of us. It was supposed to be a warning, just a quick scare for some punk dealing where he shouldn't have been, turf that belonged to a crew that paid me to look the other way. Ray tagged along because he knew the guy, said he could talk some sense into him. But when the guy spat on the floor and called us crooked cops, something in me snapped. I hit him, butt of the gun, once, twice, 3 times. Quick, ugly. When the body hit the ground, Ray froze. Looked at me like I just crossed a line we couldn't walk back. He didn't argue, just asked, "Where do we dump him?" We buried him near an abandoned rail line off Grant Avenue. Didn't say a word on the ride back. Just the sound of old tracks popping under the weight of silence. After that, any deviation in his routine set me off. If he took a new route home, opened early, closed late, I noticed. My life started mirroring his. Didn't even realize I'd stopped sleeping right, snapping at coworkers, skipping reports. The captain asked if I needed time off. I said it was nothing, but the truth? I only felt at ease when I saw that garage shut down for the night. Like every dark window was a silent agreement that the past stayed buried. I spent weeks memorizing his schedule like it was a case file. What time he arrived, who stopped by, how long he spent in the back room. Everything. Nothing left to chance. I didn't want noise, just closure. The plan was simple. Cut power to the block. There's an old junction box down the alley. Get in early. He always showed up before 7:30 a.m. on Wednesdays. Next Wednesday, I'd already be waiting inside. Still dark when I entered. The air smelled like burnt coffee and old engine grease. I moved like I lived there. I knew where the floor creaked, where the shadows pooled. Crouched between the tool cabinet and the wall, listening to the ticking clock above the door. At 7:22, I heard the lock turn. He came in whistling, same off-key rhythm from years back. Dropped his bag on the counter, started the coffee pot, then walked to the back. The sound of water filling the machine masked my steps. I moved slow, focused. When he came back, still holding the mug, he saw me. Froze. The whistle stopped. The scent of coffee filled the gap between us. For a full second, neither of us said a word. "You?" he whispered. I raised the gun. Calm. No reaction, just decision. His eyes flicked from fear to understanding. He knew this wasn't about today. It was about everything. I wasn't gonna say anything, he muttered. I believed him. But that didn't matter anymore. One shot, clean, chest. He fell slow, like the body resisted giving in. The mug shattered. Coffee everywhere. And silence. Took me 7 minutes. Flipped the power back on. Locked up like he would've. Hung the closed sign. Took the camera hard drive. Wiped prints. Left through the alley. Got in my car 2 blocks down. Turned on the radio. A guy on the morning show warned about a heat wave coming Friday. Nobody looked twice at me. Just another man driving to work. Next few days, rumors started. He'd vanished. Cops talked theories. Robbery gone wrong. Maybe old enemies. Guy had a record. That helped. A dirty past makes a missing body easier to bury. I drove past the shop a few nights later. Sign still up. Place dark. Flag torn and fluttering. But no anger anymore. Just a kind of crooked piece. Found an old photo in a drawer. Me and him, leaning on a beat-up car, holding beers. Laughing at something I can't remember. We've been friends since high school. Before choices. Before uniforms. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I burned it. Smoke rose straight, without weight. In the end, I didn't kill Ray out of fear. I killed him because he was the last dirty piece of me still alive. And I needed to disappear. The basement in my house has always been the quietest place in the world. Not that cozy kind of quiet when you're reading a book or listening to rain hit the roof. I'm talking about dense, heavy silence, the kind that seems to swallow the sound of your own breathing. It was down there, in that concrete darkness, that I learned to tell the difference between what's right and what's necessary. Sometimes those two don't match, and when they don't, someone has to decide. I decided that winter, when I found out that the blood in my family carried more than shame, it carried danger. I hadn't thought about that man in years. Uncle Carl was just a shadow at family gatherings, always a drink in hand and a smile that never touched his eyes. I grew up hearing he was a bit difficult, misunderstood. Only when my younger sister died did his name resurface. Not out loud, of course. Whispered behind cracked doors, between eyes that didn't know where to look. That's when I heard the word no one wanted to say. At the funeral, I knew. No one was going to do anything about it. So I did. Working in law enforcement gave me access to a lot of things. Databases, street cams, archived files that no one bothers to open. I never had to say out loud that I was looking for him. Just a social security number typed during my overnight shift, and the rest unfolded by itself. Carl lived in a rundown neighborhood 40 minutes outside the city, in a house with blinds that never opened. He lived off government assistance, alone, barely left for groceries. But it was a security cam by a grocery alley that showed what made my skin crawl. He was holding the hand of a boy, no older than 8. And he was looking around like he knew he shouldn't be seen. After that, I started driving to his area on my days off. I'd park 2 blocks down, cut the engine, and watch through the zoom lens of an old camera. It wasn't rage I felt. It was precision. I needed to know who came in and out of that house, what routines he followed, if there were still kids involved. For 3 weeks, he lived like a ghost. Left twice a week at the same time. Came back with bags, drank on the porch, smoked until late. No visitors, no children. And yet, I could feel it like a stench that clings to your clothes, that whatever was there was still inside. Some men carry evil in their posture. Carl didn't need to be caught. He needed to end. It took me 2 full days to clean out the basement. The floor was raw concrete, veined with cracks like exposed arteries. I scrubbed it with bleach, lined the walls in thick plastic, and installed a single floodlight on a tripod, pointed right at the chair. Nothing improvised. This wasn't impulse. This was execution. I bought reinforced cuffs, checked the bolts for strength, tested the soundproofing. And it held. No windows down there. Just one heavy door that locked from the outside and a mineral metallic smell that clung to the throat. Every footstep echoed like something was waiting. But I didn't feel fear. I felt like I was finally cleaning something that had rotted for decades. I called him on a Wednesday night. Used that flat, careful tone they teach you at the academy to calm down people in shock. Son had been sorting through stuff at Grandma's house after her passing, found some old family photos and documents. Told him there were a few letters of his too, maybe even some paperwork about inheritance or benefits he'd want to see. But what really sold it was what I added next. I might be able to get you a meeting with a social worker from the department, someone who could help with your housing case. It was half true, and I knew he needed it. He went quiet, like he was trying to hear if I was lying. Then, hoarse and tired, he said, "All right, just for a few minutes. We agreed on Friday, 7 p.m. My jaw locked when I hung up. It felt like pulling the trigger of a gun you already know is loaded. He showed up 20 minutes late, wearing a worn-out denim jacket and damp sneakers. His beard was grown out, eyes sunken, the look of someone who's lived too long in curtainless rooms. I pretended to be going through a box in the hallway when the bell rang. Opened the door with a rehearsed smile. He looked at me like I was a stranger. "You look different," he muttered. I invited him in, offered coffee. He refused, said he couldn't stay long. We sat at the table with a folder of old paperwork, certificates, receipts, a photo of me at age 6. "Thought you might want this back," I said, sliding over the picture of him with his arm around my dad. He stared at it too long. Long enough for me to remember what I'd heard. And to see in his eyes that he knew I knew. "There's more boxes downstairs from Grandma. Old stuff, maybe more pictures." I said it casually, already holding the basement light key. He hesitated. Looked at the door like he might back out, but curiosity won. Or maybe it was the weight of everything he'd buried. He went first, gripping the rusted handrail, coughing from the dust. I flipped on the floodlight before stepping down. The harsh white beam sliced through the dark, revealing the chair, the too clean floor, the plastic-coated walls. He froze. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. I locked the door behind me. The metal click echoed like a verdict. He backed up 2 steps, but there was nowhere to go. The basement was tight, low-ceilinged, the air thick. "You lost your mind?" he said. I just looked at him. For a few seconds, I let the silence speak. The floodlight shook slightly, casting aging shadows on his face. "Do you remember Amanda?" I asked flatly. He went pale, like I'd said a name he'd trained himself to forget. "I never touched her," he snapped, way too fast. I hadn't accused him. Just said her name. His breathing shortened. His eyes searched for exits in the plastic, the floor, anything but me. There were none. She was 7. 7. I said it like that number alone could split the world in half. We thought she was cutting from anxiety. But you taught her that. He collapsed, knees giving out. Didn't cry, didn't beg, just mumbled. I pulled the cuffs from my pocket. They hit the floor louder than they should have. There was no struggle. He didn't have the will. Sat in the chair like he knew his existence owed something. I cuffed his wrists tight. When he tried to speak, I placed the surgical gag. No yelling, no crying. I did it like collecting evidence clean, deliberate. The sedative was fast, accessible through my job. I sat on the floor beside him, watching until his chest stopped rising. No blood, just the sound of my heartbeat finally quiet. I stayed down there almost an hour after he died. Not out of fear, not regret, just to be sure that in that silence, I still existed. Ran my hands over my arms, felt dried sweat, slight numbness in my fingers. It was strange. I didn't feel real outside that room. Maybe upstairs, life was just theater. Because down here, even with a dead body beside me, I felt more justice than in any courtroom I'd ever seen. I climbed up slowly, step by step, like surfacing from a long dive. Changed clothes, wiped prints from door handles, stashed the syringe in my patrol kit. Turned on the news and drank coffee by the window. Cars passed outside, clueless that sometimes evil lives in the basement of someone you'd trust to protect your family. I didn't bother hiding the body. Men like Carl don't leave grief, they leave voids. And voids with time become silence. The cause of death: alcohol, heart failure. Case closed in 3 weeks. I went back to work that Monday. No one noticed a thing. Handled a domestic call, advised a teen in crisis, ordered 2 pizzas for lunch. Sometimes I wonder if evil is something you can even see, or if it only reveals itself in contrast, like a lack of reaction, or the twisted peace of knowing no one else will get hurt. Because you made a choice, no one else had the courage to. I sleep well, sometimes better than before. Not because I did the right thing, but because I did what was necessary. I work at the 16th precinct in the county. One of those buildings stuck in time beige walls, stale coffee, the smell of rushed bleach jobs. I put on the badge every morning, holster my gun, smile at civilians, and pretend I still take pride in it. But the truth is, justice isn't about right or wrong. It's about who writes the final report. And I've learned to write it well. I've learned how to smile while they take from me what I earned. And I learned from her that the world doesn't reward those who play fair. Only the ones who play smarter. Her name was Sarah Whitmore. 10 years older than me, 2 ranks higher, and with that kind of presence that made even captains lower their voices when she walked in. It wasn't just about skill, it was her aura. That irritating ability to make everyone feel heard, respected, inferior, and of course that perfect smile. The same smile she wore when she presented the case report I had written. I'd led the bust, negotiated with the suspect, calmed the victim, typed every line. But she stood at the press podium, holding my report, saying, it was a team effort. A team. As if I were just another shadow in the background of the photo. Right then, in the pop of camera flashes, I made my decision. After that day, I started watching her differently, more closely. The pause she took before answering questions. The way she handed out compliments like crumbs to hungry pigeons. I began mimicking her tone of voice, the words she used around the higher-ups. Slowly, I made her see me as an ally. "You've got real potential here, Lex," she said once, patting my shoulder like a proud big sister. I smiled, always smiled, while mentally logging every weakness, every lapse in attention, every detail of her life she let slip between conversations. It was easy. People like Sarah think they're in control, until someone pulls the right thread and the whole performance unravels. I started small. A delayed report here, a half-past message there. Nothing too damaging, just enough to create friction with the new lieutenant. Then came harmless rumors, softly spoken over break room coffee. "She's been leaving early a lot lately, huh?" Or, "Strange, Sarah's been handing off a lot of cases recently. Everything okay with her?" The beauty of manipulation is in the nuance. You don't point, you just flick on the flashlight and let others stumble over what you've lit up. And she still saw me as her confidant. "You're the only one I trust in this place," she whispered one night, her eyes fixed on my coffee mug. It was after a rough interrogation, and she was drained, that addictive kind of vulnerability. She started opening up more. About her teenage son who barely spoke to her, the ex-husband who ruined weekends, the nightmares that came back every time she stepped into a crime scene. I listened with surgical focus. Not out of empathy, but because the more someone strips themselves bare in front of you, the easier it is to know exactly where to cut. When I caught wind of an anonymous complaint about mishandled evidence in the Holloway case, one she had led flawlessly months ago, I saw my window. All I had to do was suggest she'd fudged something minor. Nothing proven, just smoke. I drafted the complaint in the middle of the night with gloves on, at an old laptop using free Wi-Fi at a truck stop miles away. The language was clean, legal terms, case dates, subtle implications of a personal connection. It was all fake. But the kind of fake that feels real when the right voices repeat it. The first crack appeared on a Monday morning briefing. Sarah was late, never happened before. When she showed up, her eyes looked dimmer, her posture slumped. No one said anything outright, but the undertones were everywhere. The lieutenant avoided eye contact. Rookies whispered more than usual, and assignments started bypassing her desk. Me, I stayed close, helpful. "Want me to double-check that report for you, Sarah? I can cover the night patrol if you need a break." She thanked me with that wilted smile, the one people wear when they're trying to keep the floor from crumbling beneath them. That's when I knew I didn't need to take her down all at once. I could let her sink slowly, quietly, swallowed by the silence. Thursday, I brought her 2 coffees and said we should talk. She thought it was about work. Sat down, exhausted, pulled her hair loose, unstrapped her holster. Sarah never unstrapped her holster. In that moment, I knew she was cracking. "Some days I just want to disappear," she muttered. "Just vanish for a week. Reset everything," I nodded. "You don't have to carry this alone." She gave me a tired half-smile, like a wounded animal still trying to look dangerous. I offered something gentle, a night out of town, just us two. "I've got a cabin, quiet, private. You can see the stars." It was true, and also not. She hesitated, then said yes. We drove in silence along Route 39 until we reached the cabin. Remote, surrounded by pines. The kind of place where even the wind seems to knock first. I lit candles, poured wine. Made everything look like comfort, not a setup. Sarah looked relieved. Kicked off her boots, tossed her phone on the couch, exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. She waited for me to sit. I did. She started talking again, about her son, her fear of being suspended, about feeling like she was unraveling. She reached for my hand. "If I step away, will you keep going? Everything we built in here?" I said yes. Then I walked to the kitchen and refilled our glasses, hers heavier. It wasn't poison. That would be too easy. It was something slower, more symbolic. The substance was legal, in small doses, but mixed with alcohol, it blurred memory, slowed speech, unraveled short-term recall. She sipped slowly. So did I. We talked like old friends at the end of a long chapter. When her sentences began to slur, I helped her to the bedroom. She collapsed onto the bed like a child, arms limp. I removed her necklace, drew the curtains, fixed her hair gently. Then I staged the photos, not on her phone, a burner. I planted falsified documents next to her hand, a firearm she never owned. Enough to suggest scandal, enough to smear without leaving fingerprints. I saved everything to a flash drive, and the next morning I made sure it leaked. Sarah remembers nothing from that night. Or maybe she pretends not to. When she came back to work, something was hollow. She avoided mirrors, jumped when her phone rang. The lieutenant suspended her pending internal review. Whispers flew. Drugs? Blackmail? Something with that prosecutor from the Holloway case? I said nothing. Just kept my same blank expression. Sad, huh? I murmured in the hallway as she walked past. She looked at me like she knew. But she couldn't prove anything. Because in the end, the only thing she was left with was the question, did I do this to myself? I never wanted to ruin her. I wanted to see her human, small. I wanted her to feel, even for 1 second, what I felt standing behind her at that press conference. That moment you realize no one's going to give you credit. And sometimes the only way to win is to bleed quietly while they clap for someone else. Now I sit in the office that used to be hers, my name on the door, my badge a little shinier. And I feel exactly what I hoped I would. Nothing. No guilt, no remorse, just a strange peace. Justice isn't about right or wrong. It's about who writes the final report, and now, I'm the one writing it. If these stories made you uncomfortable, then they did exactly what they were meant to, like the video. Share it with someone who's not afraid to face the darker sides of the human mind. And tell me in the comments which one kept echoing in your head, even after the screen went black. Because sometimes, it's not the scream, not the weapon, not the shadow that lingers. Sometimes, all it takes is one wrong turn.